All right, the first step is to post the data to the server. So we're going to extend our API layer and implement the ability to post a listing to the server. So here in the API folder, let's go to listings.js. Before we get started, I'm going to remove these parameters. We don't need these. That was just for a demo. So here we're going to add a new function called add listing for posting a listing. So we give it a listing object. And here we're going to use our API client to post this listing to the server. Now in HTTP protocol, each request has a special header called content type. You're probably familiar with it. With this header, we tell the server what kind of data we're going to send in the request. For example, when we send a JSON object to the server, the content type is automatically set to application/JSON. Now for uploading files or images, we have to use a special content type called multipart/form-data. This tells the server that we're sending a large request and the body of the request is divided into multiple parts. Now, in this case, we're not going to manually set the content type header. Instead, we're going to create a form data object in JavaScript. When we send a form data object using API Sauce or Axios will internally set the content type to multipart/form data. So let's create a form data object. We call it data. Now, this object has a bunch of methods. We can use the append method to add a new key value pair. The first one is title. We set it to listing the title. Then we add price. Next, we set category ID. That's another property that the server expects. Now, our listing object has a property called category, which is an object itself, and has this property called value. Now, in the future, we can change this to ID to be more consistent. But for now, let's not worry about it. That's not the purpose of this step. Next, we add description. Now, each listing has one or more images. So here we need to iterate over images array. We can use a traditional for loop, or we can use listing.images.forEach. That's what I prefer. So we pass a function here. Image goes to. Here we call data.append. The key is images. And the value is an object with 3 properties. Name, which should be unique. To generate a unique name, I'm going to add a second parameter to this function called index. And then use it to generate a unique name like this. So name is image plus index. Now we should set the type to image/JPEG and the URI to the image itself. So this image is a string that represents the URI of an image on the user's device. Okay. So we're done with the images. Now each listing can optionally have a location. So here we check if listing has location, then we call data.append location. Now for the value, we have to serialize the location object as a string. Otherwise, the server is going to give us an error. So JSON.stringify listing.location. Okay. So our form data object is ready. Now we call client.post. We're going to post it to listings endpoint, or we can use the endpoint constant that we created earlier. Now, this post method returns a promise, so we should return it from our API function as well. And finally, we need to expose our new API function, add listing. We're done with this step. Next, we're going to call this API to post a listing to the server.